Emma, you need to listen.
No, I do not.
Calm down, guys. I'm being nice. I'm not going anywhere.
Leave me alone.
Marcus shoved the restaurant door and snapped, donned to make a scene, Emma, sending her against the wet brick of the alley. Betrayal flickered through her chest the way a cold brand hits exposed skin, and she tasted copper at the back of her mouth. You promised, Emma, and the word cut into the rain. Marcus shoved his hands into his pockets and said, "Promises change," then turned his back and walked toward the street lamp. Emma knocked her shoulder on the brick and reached for her crossbody bag. Her fingers closed on the worn leather strap and then on nothing. The strap had slipped free when Marcus pushed. She crouched, fingers searching for a fallen phone among puddles and cigarette butts. A delivery crate rattled when the wind threw it. A taxi hissed on wet pavement half a block away. The alley smelled of oil, fried garlic from the restaurant, and wet cardboard. She kept the word betrayal in her head like a broken clock that would not stop. Betrayal explained the sudden looseness in her legs. It explained why her voice came thin when she managed, "Marcus, what are you doing?" Marcus looked back once, a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "I told you, Emma, you make scenes." "You're remaking it worse." He walked away faster, the hem of his designer jacket cutting small arcs of spray off the curb. Emma's hands trembled. She pushed hair behind her ear the way she always did when she needed time to think. That small motion had always been a private signal to steady herself. It failed now. A woman she didn't know had opened the restaurant door and watched for a second, then closed it again, as if refusing to become involved. The alley swallowed the sound of her heels. She was alone with the rain and the raw fact that Marcus had left. She tried to rise. Muscle memory told her how to stand. Her legs betrayed her. Marcus's final sentence, "Promises change," had replayed like a recording she could not turn off. Shame joined the betrayal. The shame tightened her jaw and made her cheeks hot. She wrapped her arms around herself and pressed the sleeve of her jacket against her eyes to stop the heat of tears. A man stepped from a doorway beneath a dim street lamp. He moved quietly, careful not to startle. He wore a long wool coat and carried a leather satchel. When he approached, he kept 2 paces away and tilted his head the way someone who listens without rushing does. Emma watched him, counting heartbeats to keep from shaking. The man set his gloves on top of the satchel and said in a low voice, "I saw everything. Are you okay?" The arrival of Daniel changed the immediate atmosphere in a way Emma could mark with actions. She wiped her face, pushed damp hair behind her ear again, and answered, "No." The answer was a single syllable, not an explanation. Daniel crouched to put his hands on his knees, careful to keep his coat clean. He offered a bottle of water from his satchel. "Sit on that crate," he said, nodding at the delivery crate. "You don't have to stand in the rain." Emma sank slowly, the crate cold through her skirt. This moment carried an emotion shift, from raw betrayal to guarded relief. Emma's shoulders loosened a fraction because someone had offered something practical, water, a place to sit, rather than a performance of sympathy. She handed her phone to Daniel without saying why. He scanned it and said, "You want me to call someone?" Emma tightened her grip and shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Daniel, what happened?" and waited. His voice did not push. The alley clock chimed from a nearby tower. Dishwasher clangs echoed from the restaurant like a steady pulse. "Emma," Marcus lied, he'd been late for work. He was with her. She looked at Marcus' retreating silhouette once, then down at the wet pavement. He'd choose me. Her voice went brittle at the last words. Daniel listened while small details supplied the plot. He noticed the thin silver necklace catching little drops of rain, the small scar on Emma's left eyebrow visible against damp hair. He set his brief satchel between them and, without fanfare, removed a pair of leather gloves. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Do you want to go somewhere dry?" His offer asked for a choice, not a surrender. Marcus's exit had already been an external event. Daniel's arrival created a second. Emma hesitated. Shame pressed at her again. She had rehearsed keeping her life private, and here she was taking a stranger's hand to leave an alley. She stood and brushed rain off her jacket with her palms. "Okay," she said. Her voice was small but steady. "Okay, Daniel." Just somewhere dry, they moved to the mouth of the alley where the light was worse, but the street noise was louder. Daniel walked a step behind Emma, letting her set the pace. As they reached the curb, a taxi vanished and then returned. A man in a delivery uniform nearly bumped them and muttered, "Sorry," without turning his head. Emma's breathing came in measured pulls. The betrayal that had driven her here shifted again into wary curiosity. She watched Daniel's hands and his face for signs of motive. At the cafe doorway, Daniel paused and said, "Wait." He produced a napkin from his coat and offered it to her. Emma accepted it with fingers that were still damp. "What's your name?" Daniel, as if asking the most predictable question in the world. Emma Rivera." He repeated the name softly, as if testing how it fit with his perception. "Emma, do you want me to come inside with you?" She looked at the cafe's warm glass and then at Daniel. "Yes," she said. The cafe smelled of coffee and warm milk. A barista in a grey apron glanced at Emma and then away, avoiding engagement. Emma sat at a corner table under a low lamp and placed her wet bag by her feet. Daniel took the chair opposite but kept his coat on. He ordered 2 black coffees and set one in front of her. "Drink slowly," he said. "It will help steady you." Emma picked up the cup and blew across the surface before sipping. The warmth moved through her fingers. The middle of the chapter begins to push the tension outward toward other people and choices. Emma's phone buzzed with a message. She read it with a small, involuntary stiffening of her neck. The message was from Marcus. "We need to talk in the morning." Don't make assumptions. Emma squinted at the screen and then turned it face down on the table. Daniel watched that movement and said, "Do you want me to keep your phone?" Emma hesitated and then handed him the device. She felt exposed, and refusing help felt like a reclaiming instinct. Marcus' text was a small reveal that tried to reframe the earlier event. That text created an emotion shift, from wounded to suspicious. Emma's hands tightened around the cup. The bruise of betrayal pulsed as she remembered Marcus' clipped voice. "Emma, are you sure about what you saw?" Daniel, he did not rush her to an answer. She ticked off details aloud: the designer jacket, the laugh lines of the woman in the restaurant, the way Marcus had refused to meet her eyes. Each detail landed like a small, indisputable fact. A mid-chapter cliffhanger arrived when the cafe door opened, and a man paused in the doorway looking toward their table. For a breath they both froze. The man was not Marcus. He was an acquaintance of Marcus's, someone with a familiar face from their neighborhood, holding a parcel. He shook his head and left. The door closed. Emma's body relaxed on a slow exhale, and then she laughed once, a sharp sound of disbelief that felt like another test, she said. Daniel's jaw tightened a fraction, then smoothed. "People who cause trouble are predictable," he said. "They come back around." He gave no lecture. His observation just stated a fact. They left the cafe after an hour of quiet talk. Daniel walked Emma to a small taxi stand and then paid for a cab when she hesitated at the meter. The rain had stopped. Street vendors were folding awnings and stacking crates. Emma felt the day's motion wear on her like a damp coat. When the cab pulled up, Marcus's silhouette appeared at the corner, watching. He had stopped halfway down the block and was leaning against a lamppost, arms folded, jaw tight. Emma's breathing hitched. The sight of Marcus created a spike of tension. Marcus walked over with a speed that had a purpose. He stopped 2 paces away and said, "Emma, wait, don't get in that cab." "Marcus, we need to talk." Emma's hands went to the phone in her pocket. She kept her palm flat over it. Daniel stood slightly behind her, hands visible, a posture meant to say he would not interfere in a show of force. Marcus looked at Daniel and then back at Emma. "Who is this?" Marcus, voice sharp. "Daniel Hayes." Daniel answered, "I saw what happened. I'm the one who helped her." Marcus' gaze flicked to Daniel's coat, to the satchel, then to Emma. The argument that followed met the requirement for rapid back and forth. "Marcus, you can tee just Daniel, I can stand here." Marcus snapped, "You don't know anything about us, Daniel. I know what I saw, Marcus. You have no right." Emma put up a hand. "Marcus, stop," she said. The cadence of each voice differed. Marcus clipped words like commands. Daniel spoke measured sentences. Emma cut in with short, fractured lines. That difference made each speaker distinct. Marcus tried to rewrite what happened. "I was with clients. She was with me for business reasons." Emma's face shifted. "Marcus," she said, "don't do that. Don't make me out to be the problem." Her voice hardened. Shame cracked into anger. She stepped forward a fraction and said, "Leave me alone." Marcus's shoulders rose, and he took a step toward her. Daniel moved to stand between them, close enough to be a physical presence, not a threat. Daniel's voice stayed quiet. "Marcus, step back." Marcus counted his own lines. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he said. The exchange climbed. Marcus raised his voice. "Emma, come back with me now." Emma's fingers closed until her knuckles went white around the strap of her bag. She breathed, then said clearly, "I choose not to." This was the climax beat where she rejected Marcus's control. Her action, stepping away, was the concrete turning point. Marcus' expression lost color. He reached out one hand as if to pull her back. At that reach, the physical stakes rose. Daniel moved in front of Emma, not to fight but to block the action. "Marcus, stop." Marcus swore, and then launched into accusations. "You're remaking a scene. You're embarrassing us." He jabbed a finger at Emma and then at Daniel. Emma faced Marcus squarely. "Marcus, you told me you loved me. You lied." Her chest felt raw. Marcus' voice flared. "I didn't lie about everything." Emma answered, "You hid her. You hid the calls. You left." 3 to 6 rapid exchanges occurred in the heart of the confrontation. "Marcus." "Emma, people change." "Emma, not like this." "Daniel, walk away." "Marcus, you don't know her." "Emma, I know more than enough." Daniel added, "You've already left. Let her go." This cadence kept the dialogue punchy. Listeners could follow who said what because each line used names frequently, and the lines were short. Marcus stormed off in a different direction from the first time, this time with a shout that carried down the block. He cursed and called Emma names, but his words thinned as he put distance between them. When he turned the corner, the alley light caught the inside of his jacket and showed the curve of his shoulders. He was gone. Emma collapsed into the nearest doorway with a small sound that could have been a sob or a laugh. Daniel crouched and put his hand on her shoulder for a long second, then withdrew it when she did not welcome touch. The emotional thread shifted again. From anger to fragile relief, Emma let the relief in but kept it small. She thanked Daniel with one sentence. "Thank you," she said. He gave a short, steady nod. At her insistence, he handed back her phone. She typed Marcus's number into a block list and then deleted a few older messages that stung. Each small physical action, the block, the delete, served as an empowerment enacted, not declaimed. They walked away from the alley together toward a smaller diner that stayed open through the night. Daniel walked beside Emma, but let her lead. Outside the diner, a delivery driver wiped his hands on a rag and called to someone on his radio. Emma sat at the counter and ordered eggs and toast, though her appetite was slight. Daniel ordered black coffee again. They ate in near silence that felt companionable rather than awkward. A final surprise changed how Emma saw the earlier evening. As they sat, the diner screen flashed a news item about a local charity gala. A photograph of Marcus appeared in a cropped screenshot next to the text, showing him at an event with a woman whose face was now familiar to Emma. Daniel pointed to the image and said, "So he mixes business and personal. He wants people to see him a certain way." Emma leaned forward, reading the caption. The image confirmed that Marcus' explanation about clients had been partial at best. That concrete reveal pushed Emma from suspicion to clarity. She finished her plate and stood. Outside, rain left the pavement glossy. Daniel offered his hand again, this time with no pressure. He did not ask her to marry him. "Do you want to walk a little?" Emma looked at the cracked sidewalk and then at his palm. She placed her hand lightly in his. Her fingers brushed the leather of his glove that he had taken off earlier. There was no sudden declaration, only a choice. They walked along the riverfront as dawn began to smear gold across the buildings. Emma's steps matched Daniel's. She did not yet know what would come next, but she had made a decision. She would not return to Marcus's version of the story. The chapter's final concrete beat arrived when they reached a small cafe with a rounded window and a dented sign. Emma pushed open the cafe door and set her wet leather jacket on the chair, breathing as daylight eased across the table. This night had started with Marcus's shove and the sharpness of betrayal. It moved through humiliation, through the arrival of a stranger, through a tense confrontation and a public rejection, and it ended with a small, clear choice. To leave the alley and sit in a dry cafe and accept a kind hand when it was offered. Emma had acted in small, decisive ways, blocking a number, stepping away, pressing her palm to the phone, that showed movement without slogans. The last image of the chapter is the cafe door closing briefly behind them, a single practical action that marked a change in how Emma would proceed. Emma ran without looking, pushing through the slick crowd at the taxi stand and slipping on the wet curb. Betrayal tightened her throat as Marcus grabbed her forearm and hissed, "Emma, stop this now," while passers-by turned their heads. Rain hit her face and stung. She tasted metal and the word promise hung in her mouth like a burned note. She wrenched free and dropped to the sidewalk, palms scraping concrete. Breathing fast and shallow because betrayal had ruled the last hour, and she could not make it mean anything gentler. She did not wait to explain herself. She shoved her hand into her pocket, found the coins she meant to give the busker and let them fall. The presence of other people, of taxi lights cutting across rain, made the sharpness of what Marcus had accused her of feel absurd and dangerous at once. Emma pushed herself upright and hugged her coat tighter. Her phone screen flashed with missed calls from Marcus. She left it face down on the curb and did not look. Inside the diner booth, she slid into the corner and folded her hands over her knees until they trembled. Her coat was damp at the shoulder where rain had soaked through. The waitress put a chipped ceramic cup of coffee down without speaking and watched Emma with the careful distance of someone who had seen late night arguments before. Emma kept her eyes on the surface of the coffee and breathed through the tightness in her chest because the betrayal she felt meant she could not trust what anyone else said to her tonight. Marcus' voice had been low but sharp earlier, demanding and small at the same time, done to make a scene. "Emma," he had said when he dragged her out of the restaurant, and the motion of the door against her back had left a sting. That shove at the restaurant door, the abruptness, the way he turned public space into an accusation, stayed lodged beneath her ribs and pushed her toward two immediate, practical choices. Let him pull her back or remove herself from the room entirely. She had chosen motion. The diner smelled of coffee grounds and fryer oil. A television in the corner played a late night talk show with a laugh track that bled into the room. Emma's legs rested against the base of the booth, and she counted the rings in the laminate table until she could name where the pain sat in her body. She kept her voice low when she said, "I need to go," though she had nowhere to go that felt safe. Outside the window Marcus paced, running a hand through his hair, calling her name once and then twice. He lifted his phone and typed, then slammed it down on the hood of a parked car. The sound traveled through the glass like a dropped plate. When he pushed through the diner's door, the bell clanged, and the fluorescent light flickered. Customers leaned forward like spectators. Forks rested mid-air. Marcus moved like a man used to commanding a room. His breathing came faster when he could not get the result he expected. Marcus' entrance changed the diner. Chairs scraped back. The cook looked past the counter and cupped his hands near his mouth. A man at a table said, "Hey, keep it down," and then stopped because the air in the room had shifted into sharp focus. Marcus crossed to the booth and did not ask. He reached for Emma's shoulder with an intent that tightened her jaw and made her lungs shallow. "Emma, come with me," he demanded. He used her name as if it were an order. Emma did not look at him. She kept her palms flat against her knees and moved only when she needed to. Her voice was small but steady. "Marcus, not here." Her refusal landed in the room like a small, deliberate object. He misread the refusal as weakness and leaned in, forcing the booth between them like a mounted barrier. His hand closed on the back of the seat. The vinyl squeaked. A man at the counter watched with expressionless attention before he stood and brushed his hands on his coat. He walked forward with unwavering pace and stopped between Marcus and Emma. Daniel Hayes stood unannounced and quiet. He did not put his hand on Marcus's chest. He simply reached for the space between them, palms open, posture even, and said, "Sir, this has to stop now." His voice was low and calm, the kind of measured statement that made people listen because it was not trying to start an argument. Marcus blinked and then laughed a short, brittle laugh. "Who are you to tell me anything?" He snapped. "This is none of your business." He stepped forward and Daniel did not back down. Emma watched Daniel tilt his head when Marcus' anger rose, the way he shifted his weight to brace without aggression. Daniel's coat was damp at the collar, his hands were bare. He held himself like someone who was practiced at not showing hurry. The waitress who had set the coffee down came over and placed a napkin on the table with careful fingers. Her name tag read Rosa. She spoke so quietly that her voice almost failed to reach the group, but the words landed. "Marcus, you've caused scenes before. This isn't the first time. Please leave her alone." She Marcus' name slowly, like someone naming a recurring problem, and the naming changed the room's calculations. Marcus' face tightened. He opened his mouth and closed it. He had a quick look toward the door and then at Rosa. "You don't know what you were talking about," he said. But the tone had a new edge, defensive and searching for allies he did not have. Customers shifted in their seats. A man with a newspaper folded it and put down his cup. The manager, a broad-shouldered woman, stepped out of the kitchen and put a hand on the counter. Marcus' anger slid from performative to raw. He reached for Emma again. His hand found her wrist and squeezed. Emma flinched and looked directly at him. Her nails pressed into the skin of her palm until the edges whitened. She used the sound she had been holding all evening, a single controlled breath, and the movement in her mouth was a decision. Daniel moved with a quiet urgency. He stepped closer, placing himself between Marcus and Emma with one hand raised as barrier and one steadying toward Emma without touching. "Marcus, stop." "Daniel, let her go." The words were short. Marcus pushed his chin forward. "Back off." "Who's this?" he snapped. The exchange turned sharp and immediate. The room held for the quick back and forth. "Emma, you can just walk away." Marcus' voice pitched to persuade and coerce at once. "We need to talk." He tried to turn the argument into negotiation, as if there were terms to be bargained. "We don't have to do this here. Emma, you started it." She Marcus's name as if it were a fact that needed repeating. The name carried the betrayal between them. 3 short lines of rapid exchange followed as the staff attempted to defuse the situation. "Don't touch her," the manager said. "Call the police if you must," Rosa added. Marcus flared. "Do you think you can threaten me?" he demanded. Daniel held his ground. "I am not threatening," he said. "I'm asking you to leave." The words were a steady wall. Marcus shoved forward in a last attempt to regain control, and his jacket brushed Emma's shoulder. Daniel reacted with a firm, nonviolent block. His palm connected with Marcus' chest, and the contact was enough to halt Marcus' momentum. The booth's vinyl creaked, a spoon rattled in a saucer. Marcus' balance faltered. For a fraction of a second, the room smelled of coffee and wet wool and the metallic tang of adrenaline. Emma's eyes moved from Marcus to Daniel and back again. She felt something shift inside her, from panic to a sliver of clarity. The betrayal that had led her to run had split into new feelings. Doubt about whether staying quiet would ever keep her safe, fear for how far Marcus might go, and then a narrow, stubborn resolve to refuse his control. She found her voice and used it. "Marcus, leave me alone," she said. "Not tonight." Not again. The sentence was short and anchored in action. She stood up. Marcus' mouth opened and closed. He searched the faces in the room, looking for a single ally. He found none. The manager stepped forward and said, "You can go now or I will call the police." Marcus' jaw tightened. He pushed his hands into his pockets and stormed out into the rain, muttering under his breath. He did not look back. Outside, he leaned against his car and typed a message on his phone while people in the diner watched him through the window. He made one last call and then walked away with agitated steps. Emma's shoulders sagged but did not collapse. She held the small steadying breath for a moment and let it out slowly. Rosa returned with a plastic, wrapped sandwich and set it on the table. She placed her hand briefly over Emma's wrist the way one might cover a small animal to calm it. "Stay as long as you need." Rosa without dramatics. Emma accepted the sandwich and closed her fingers around the paper like it was an anchor. The diner hummed with resumed motion. The waitress called orders. The cook shouted the next plate. A couple argued quietly at the counter. Daniel crouched to the level of the booth and spoke quietly, not to interrupt the room's recovered rhythm but to reach Emma. "Can I call someone for you?" he asked. His cadence was calm. His voice did not try to persuade. Emma blinked rain out of her lashes and thought of options. The friend who lived 3 stops away and kept odd hours. Her sister, who would demand she return home. A taxi with a driver who might watch the exchange. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Okay, Daniel." He pulled his phone from his satchel and tapped a few keys, but then closed it without dialing. "Do you want me to stay until your friend gets here?" he offered. Emma looked at him. She tested the shape of the offer with her eyes. She was used to people offering grand gestures. Daniel's offer was small and specific. It did not ask anything of her besides the right to be present. She let the word comfort sit in her chest like a small, useful object. A bus pulled up outside and its brakes hissed. A couple on a late date left money for the cashier. Daniel reached into his coat and removed his gloves, setting them on the table beside his watch. He kept his hands visible. Emma noticed the way his fingers tapped once, twice, a quiet rhythm. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. The question could have been a demand for proof or simply a need for human contact. Daniel smiled in a half-turn and said, "Daniel." "Daniel Hayes," he paused, then added, "You are Emma, right?" "Emma Rivera," her full name as if he were returning a borrowed thing. "Emma." "Yes." "Emma Rivera." She it aloud and felt a lightness at the sound because the name had weight that was hers. She Daniel one small detail about herself. She worked nights at the restaurant 2 blocks over. Daniel listened without interrupting. When he did speak, his sentences were short and clear. "Do you want me to wait with you while you call someone?" he asked. Emma nodded slowly. Rosa walked past with a coffee pot and paused to watch. She had seen this pattern before. A woman cornered by a man who expected obedience, the public theater of power, the small, decisive interventions. "Marcus has done this before." Rosa quietly to the manager. The manager's eyes hardened and she dialed without fanfare. A phone rang somewhere in the back and a clerk answered. The implied escalation remained a practical but calm presence. Outside the window, Emma saw Marcus in the reflection, a dark figure under a streetlight, phone lit in his hand. He stood for a long moment, then walked away. She watched him go, her fingers tightening on the sandwich paper. The betrayal had left a sting. It had also forced a choice she had been avoiding for weeks. Whether to keep letting Marcus arrange her life or to begin to take small removals from his control. A new sound cut through the diner. The chime of the door as a late patron entered. For a heartbeat, Emma thought Marcus had returned. The heartbeat stretched and then eased. Daniel handed Emma his coat for her shoulders with no flourish. He did not ask for intimacy. He offered a practical protection, and that was different from pity. Emma accepted the coat and felt the wool against her damp shoulder. She smelled cedar and citrus, and the steady presence of someone not performing rescue. Outside, a taxi idled and the driver smoked on his steps. Emma's phone vibrated once, then again, then went quiet. She dialed a number with fingers that still shook and pressed the phone to her ear. Her friend answered after 2 rings and said, "Where are you?" Emma heard the diner and the friend said she would come straight away. The call dropped into small talk while a plan formed. Go home, lock doors, decide next steps in daylight. Daniel stayed until Emma's friend arrived, and when the friend did, she hugged Emma hard and said, "You came so close to not coming back inside." Her voice quivered with relief and admonition. Emma let herself be led out the door. She turned once and said, "Thank you, Daniel." He nodded and did not offer his card or a speech. He simply lifted his hand in a brief, respectful wave as they left. Emma glanced back. Marcus was nowhere in sight. The city smelled of wet pavement and fried onions. The decision she had made in the doorway, to refuse Marcus and accept help in a small way, settled into a quiet resolve. It was not dramatic. It was a concrete action. She had stood, she had spoken, she had asked for help. The immediate danger had ended for now. But Marcus's hand on his phone had not been an empty gesture. Through the restaurant window, Emma had seen him with a clenched jaw, dialing. The night would not resolve itself with a single shoving match. The stakes had moved. Emma took her friend's offered cab home. She kept Daniel's coat folded across her knees during the ride, a tangible memory of one person who had acted rather than watched. The betrayal still marked her, but it had shifted into a plan. Speak to the manager at work tomorrow, change her schedule, tell her sister, document what Marcus had done. When the cab pulled away from the curb, Emma watched the diner shrink in the window. The neon sign washed across her face and then blurred as the taxi gained speed. She folded her hands together and felt for the small, solid weight of action. Tonight she had refused to be moved like a piece on someone else's board. She had said Marcus's name aloud to hold him accountable. She had let a stranger stand between them and had accepted help. At the end of the ride, she texted Daniel a short line. "Thank you. You stopped him," he replied 2 minutes later. "Call me if you need anything." She did not reply immediately. She stepped into her building, kept her keys between her fingers, and locked the door behind her with a firm, deliberate turn. The lock clicked. That click was a small, concrete beat that ended the chapter and began the next set of choices. Emotion route. Betrayal. Marcus stepped back into the alley and cut off the exit with a voice that left no room for argument. "You're not leaving like this, Emma," he said. And his hand landed on the damp brick as if planting a flag. Betrayal sat in Emma like a metal taste. She pressed her shoulder harder to the delivery awning and pushed at the pack of air between them the way someone tests a door that might still open. She had not expected him to return. The problem in the room was concrete. Marcus had followed her to the back alley and would not let her walk away. That single fact, his refusal to let go, moved her before anything else did. Emma kept one hand on her crossbody bag and another half clenched at her side. She swallowed, tasting rain and copper, and her fingers tightened on the thin silver necklace at her throat. Emma's face was wet from the rain and from what had happened in the restaurant. She could still hear the scrape of his voice, pushing order through the air. She remembered the door slamming earlier, Marcus shoving the restaurant door and snapping. Don T make a scene. Emma, the memory was precise. His palm on that heavy glass, the way he had turned her words into an accusation. That earlier shove had been a bruise on the night. This return threatened to leave a mark that would not fade. Marcus took a small step forward. "Emma, talk to me," he said. His voice had that clipped edge it took on when he wanted to make everyone else smaller. He reached, but Emma pulled back under the awning and kept her body between him and the alley mouth. Her pulse ratcheted. Fear rolled under her ribs, then sharpened into a cold, steady focus. She would not be corralled without pushing hard against it. A night cook opened a service door and stuck his head out. "You okay back there?" he asked, the question landing like a light on wet pavement. His name tag read Lewis. Lewis watched Marcus and then looked at Emma, and that very small movement changed how the alley felt. Emma recognized the watch on his wrist from the restaurant interior, the watch he de-wiped with a towel while plating orders. And she understood he was a witness who could either make the scene public or let it stay private. Emma's voice came out tight. "Marcus, stop." The line held no dramatic flourish. It was a demand folded into a plea. Marcus answered with a laugh that did not reach his eyes. "Stop what?" "Leaving. After what you did." He reached out and caught her forearm in a quick, possessive grip. She twisted away. That twist was a decision. Betrayal had pushed her toward the alley door. Fear pulled her back. Then anger flared, sharp and bright enough to act. Emma elbowed Marcus and broke free. "Let go," she said, each word short and even. Marcus tightened his grip, and his jaw worked. Lewis stayed at the door, hands half raised as if he might step out. He nothing at first. Marcus looked toward Lewis and then back at Emma, like a man deciding which audience he preferred. For the first time, Emma considered the risk of staying. She had already run once that night through a slick crowd, had slipped at the taxi stand, and had felt the press of bodies like a wall. The alley made no promises. It did not care who was right. It only held them close and let the sound of rain keep score. A figure moved in the shadow between two stacked crates. He came forward without swagger. Daniel Hayes stepped into the alley with his coat buttoned and his hands lowered, his posture open in a way that asked no permission. He stood between Emma and Marcus and looked at Marcus with a calm that made Marcus blink. "Sir, Daniel," and his voice sat low in the alley air. "You should let her go." The words were not loud, but they were precise. Marcus' mouth tightened. "And who are you?" He shot back. The question carried threat. Daniel did not raise his voice. He tilted his head and said, "My name is Daniel Hayes. I saw part of what happened inside. Let her go now." He kept his hands visible and at his sides. His presence removed one small scale from the balance, a witness who did not belong to the room, who did not owe Marcus anything. Marcus stepped at Daniel. The motion looked meant to intimidate. "You don't want to get involved, buddy." Marcus, close enough that dry breath fogged in the cold alley air. "This is private." He leaned in and his shoulder bumped Daniel's. Daniel's palm rose once, slow, and rested near Marcus's chest without touching him. "This is not private, Daniel. Not if you're forcing someone to stay." Marcus laughed, sharp. "Emma, say something. Tell him what she did." The line was a ploy to reclaim the night. Emma kept her jaw tight. She would not hand him the evidence of her own pain. Rain spattered the alley in steady pulses. Lewis took a small step back into the doorway and then out again, and his movement broke the loop of three bodies facing each other. Emma's breath came in measured pulls now. She watched Marcus' hand move to his pocket, and her chest tightened with a new, practical worry. Marcus could use his phone to humiliate her, to text pictures, to call people. She thought of the taste of copper, the restaurant's fluorescent lights, the echo of his bitter laugh. Daniel, quietly, "Marcus," put the phone away. Marcus shoved the phone into his palm and flipped the screen up like a shield. He scrolled, "I can make whatever I want public, Hayes. People will listen." His hand hovered above his contacts. Marcus' threat was a new layer. The alley's tension went from threat to immediate risk. Daniel surprised them both. He turned his brief satchel and pulled out a small, time-stamped photo and a receipt folded thin. He did it without flourish and without shouting. The photo showed Marcus leaving the restaurant earlier that night with another woman, hair wet from rain, an umbrella in the frame, Marcus' profile leaning close. The time stamp on the receipt matched the time Marcus had claimed he left alone. Daniel held the items steady between them. This is from outside the back entrance. Daniel, I walked past at 9:15. He wasn't he alone then. The revelation landed like a rock in a pond. Marcus' face changed. He tried to take back the narrative and found an absence where his power had been. That's not, Marcus began. His hands were louder than his words. Emma felt the shift inside her as if a hinge had turned. Distrust that had been blunt and full had changed into something sharper. Clarity. The knowledge that Marcus had not been honest rearranged what she believed she had seen that night. The betrayal moved again. Now it included proof. Marcus shoved the photo downward into his palm and slammed it into his jacket. He looked at Daniel like a man confronted with a mirror he had not intended to see. Who are you to bring this to me? He demanded. Someone who won't let you lie in public, Daniel. He kept his voice steady. Let her go, Marcus. There was a pause long enough to hear rain patter on metal lids. Marcus' eyes flicked to Louis and then to the alley mouth. A new calculation had begun. If the cook called for help, if someone else walked out, Marcus could look like the aggressor. Marcus spoke faster now. Emma, tell him the truth. Tell him what you did. His words were a rush, desperate to change the direction of the night. Emma, say it. He pushed closer. Emma backed up until the awning cut into her shoulder. She felt the fabric dig into her and counted ways to breathe. Her voice came out thin. Marcus, stop. Marcus, just stop. The repetition had the quality of a small bell, of someone tapping a fragile glass. Marcus reached. The gesture was a grab meant to turn her by force. He moved faster than Daniel expected. Daniel stepped forward and put a hand between them. The contact was immediate and physical. Marcus shoved hard and Daniel answered with a pull that redirected Marcus as momentum. Wood and metal banged, boxes toppled, the alley became a narrowing corridor of motion. Louis finally moved. He yelled loud and blunt, "Hey! Hey! Stop!" The shout was the first public sound of the struggle. A manager's voice answered from the restaurant door. Footsteps. People coming. The noise split the alley into two halves, the small contained fight and the widening audience. Marcus lunged and grabbed Emma's arm again, this time with a hand that tightened as if to drag. Emma's face went white with the effort to keep from crying out. Daniel turned his body and used his shoulder to wedge Marcus off. The action was close and immediate. Daniel's coat brushed Emma's rain-slick hair. For a moment it was all motion, hands, boots on wet concrete, grunts. Marcus' temper came down like a slab. Daniel's response was controlled and direct. Marcus, let her go. Daniel, and his words came in a faster line now, clipped and practical. Marcus, stop. Louis called, the manager's coming. Let her go. The back and forth here was short and sharp. 3 quick exchanges that felt like the impact of a match struck. Marcus pulled back with a curse. He shoved at Daniel once more, and Daniel pivoted, steering Marcus toward the alley mouth where the street light glowed and the chance of witnesses increased. Someone on the sidewalk started to record with a phone. Marcus looked at it, and that look was a break. He flinched away from the idea of being caught. The fight loosened. Marcus took 2 steps and then a third and turned and fled. He pushed past Louis without apology, clattered out into the drizzle, and vanished down a side street. Louis watched him go and then turned to the others in the doorway, eyes wide. People murmured. The manager called into the restaurant for someone to lock the back door. Emma stood shaking under the awning as if the world had restarted without her permission. Her knees were weak. She tasted something that was not only from the food of the night, salt and oil, but the rawness of being grabbed. Daniel moved closer and lowered himself to the crate beside her, careful, as if proximity might crack her. Emma. Daniel, using her name as a lifeline. He kept his hands away, but his voice had a steady cadence meant to count her back from the edge. She blinked and saw the small mole near his temple when he tilted his head. The detail made him human, not a stranger-shaped idea. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. He won't stop, she said. Her words were short, each one weighted. He followed me here. Emma spoke the fact instead of the emotion, because facts were less messy to hand over. Daniel nodded. You did the right thing leaving. You did. He reached to the satchel and took out a paper napkin, then unfolded it and held it out. The gesture was small and practical. Emma took it with 2 fingers and wiped her mouth. Her fingers trembled. Louis stayed near the doorway and repeated a few details to the manager. The shove at the door, the run to the taxi stand, the wet curb. The manager asked simple questions, and Louis answered them. They were ordinary procedural words, but the accumulation of answers turned the alley from a private argument into a documented complaint. Emma's emotions shifted again. Betrayal had opened into fear. Fear had bent into anger. Anger thinned into a slow, gathering clarity. She looked at Marcus' footprints in the wet street, and then at the photograph Daniel had left propped against a crate earlier. The image sat like evidence waiting to be filed. She felt a small, practical decision forming. She would not let his version be the only one people remembered. Daniel offered his phone number in a simple sentence. If you need a ride or someone to call, text me, Emma. He the name as if committing it to memory. Emma read the digits on his screen and then crumpled the napkin into her palm. The act was ordinary and deliberate. Choosing to hold something someone gave you can be its own small agreement. Loose, quietly, do you want me to call someone for you, Emma? The voice was careful. He had already been through most of the night in his head and had chosen to stay close. For the first time, Emma felt the alley as a place with more than 2 possibilities. Emma hesitated. The rain slowed toward a mist. Dawn would come sooner than night usually allowed. She remembered slipping at the curb under the taxi stand and the scrape of her knee, and she realized she had not thought about calling anyone from her life. Marcus had been the loudest voice in the room for years, and his demands had become a default calendar of decisions. Letting that end felt like stepping into a cold room without a coat. She made a small decision. Louis, can you make me a coffee? Hot. Black. Now would be fine. The line held a touch of humor, even in its exhaustion. Louis's mouth lifted briefly on it. He disappeared back into the kitchen with the brisk movement of someone already at work. Daniel moved his coat off the crate and set it over Emma's shoulders without asking, his hands quick and efficient. Just for now, he said. The coat smelled faintly of cedar. The contact was practical, not theatrical. Emma kept the coat closed with one hand and kept the other on her bag. She tested the zipper like someone feeling for a key in a pocket. They sat like that for a long moment, 3 people beneath the awning with the city behind them. The manager came out and recorded Marcus's description into his notes. Luz brought a paper cup of coffee and set it in Emma's hands. The steam rose and the warmth went to her fingers first. She took a tentative sip and found it bitter and truthful. Daniel, do you want to file a complaint, Emma? We can tell them what happened inside and out here. His voice was matter of fact. He did not push. He offered options. Emma considered it. Filing could make Marcus answer for what he'd done. It could make a paper trail. It would put facts into a system that weighed evidence. She looked at Marcus's jacket left on a curb earlier that night. She remembered him dropping it when he left the restaurant, and at the photo Daniel had shown. The twist Daniel's evidence provided rearranged not only the night, but what she owed herself. She realized that letting him run the narrative would be letting him decide memory. Emma stood and straightened. She left the coat with Daniel and tucked the thin silver necklace back under her collar. The movement felt like closing a small door. "I'll file," she said, and her voice had a steady edge now. "I'll tell them the truth." The statement was a decision in action. Not a promise, but a procedural step. "Lewis, I'll walk with you to make the statement. I'm on at 9 m. But I can wait." The offer was practical and immediate. It moved the plot forward because his choice altered what she would do next. Daniel nodded and handed her a tissue for the small scar on her eyebrow she'd rubbed. He kept his name in the conversation without claiming credit. Emma's phone buzzed once. It was a message from Marcus, 3 words that tried to close the night. "We can fix this." She did not open it. She slipped the phone into her bag. Not opening it was another decision. She looked at Daniel and said, "If he comes back, don't let him come back in that way." Her words were short but clear. Daniel met her eyes. "I want Louis will call the manager. I'll wait with you while you file. You're not alone in this, Emma." He the name again, steadying it. The reassurance was concrete, staying, waiting, recording. Those were actions that translated into safety. Outside, a taxi rolled by and slowed at the corner, then moved on. Marcus' footsteps could have been anywhere. Emma took one last look down the alley. The wet street reflected a pale light. She bent and picked up a thin burgundy scarf she'd left on a crate earlier in the night. It had a small thread pulled near the edge. She folded it and put it into her bag. Dawn softened the sky. The rain eased into a fine mist. Emma walked out into the street with Louise and Daniel beside her, and the manager behind them, and the moment felt like a practical procession. She filed a statement. She answered questions. She pointed to the place Marcus had stood, and then to the photograph Daniel had provided. Each sentence she spoke was short and precise. Each detail anchored the night to a record. After she finished, Emma and Daniel stepped back into the alley, while Louis returned to the kitchen. Daniel handed her the receipt and the time-stamped photo he'd kept. "Keep it," he said, "if you need it later." She slid the paper into the inner pocket of her coat and felt the corners press against her chest like a small ledger of facts. Emma paused at the alley mouth. She could have turned left or right. She could have hailed a cab, gone home, gone to a friend's apartment. Instead, she looked at Daniel and said, "I don't want you to come with me." The line was immediate and careful. She needed space, not theater. Daniel smiled the first time all night, small and respectful. "I can leave you the number. If you change your mind, text me." He waited a heartbeat and then stepped back. His posture gave her room without closing the door. She stepped into the street and left one object on the crate where Marcus had shoved her earlier, the thin burgundy scarf she had just put into her bag. Her fingers hesitated for a second, then she folded it twice and set it down on the wet wood. The action was a closing gesture that had nothing to do with dramatic speeches. A deliberate leaving behind. Emma pulled the coat collar up and walked toward the pale light on the avenue. The rain eased completely as she crossed the curb. She did not look back at the alley once, though she could hear the murmur of the kitchen and the clatter of a tray. She had filed a complaint, she had evidence, and she had names who could corroborate her story. The night's main conflict, the forced confrontation with Marcus, had resolved in flight and testimony, not in a tidy conversation. That resolution felt, for now, like a practical correction rather than an ending. As she reached the first intersection, her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, thumb hovering but not opening the new message. She typed a short line and sent it. "I am okay. I filed. Do not come to my building." The message was concrete and procedural. She hit send and put the phone away. Then she looked at the sky. A pale strip of dawn showed between 2 buildings. She kept walking. The last sound from the alley was Louis locking the service door, and the manager calling one order to the cooks. Emma took slow steps into the morning. The chapter ended with one small, decisive action. She crossed the street and walked away from the restaurant with her hands empty except for the strap of her bag. and she left a burgundy scarf on a crate where a man once tried to decide for her. Emotion root, betrayal, emotion shifts, betrayal fear clarity, cautious trust.